Hello everyone, this is Chad Calek and welcome to the 5th episode of the In a Crowded Room podcast. And I want to share something with you. On December 24th, 2018, actor Kevin Spacey uploaded the following video to his YouTube page.
I know what you want. Oh sure, they may have tried to separate us, but what we have is too strong, it's too powerful. I mean, after all, we shared everything, you and I. I told you my deepest, darkest secrets. I showed you exactly what people are capable of. I shocked you with my honesty, but mostly I challenged you and made you think. And you trusted me, even though you knew you shouldn't. So we're not done, no matter what anyone says. And besides, I know what you want. You want me back. Of course, some believed everything and had just been waiting with bated breath to hear me confess it all. They're just dying to have me declare that everything said is true and that I got what I deserved. Wouldn't that be easy if it was all so simple? Only you and I both know it's never that simple, not in politics and not in life. But you wouldn't believe the worst without evidence, would you? You wouldn't rush to judgments without facts, would you? Did you? No, not you. You're smarter than that.
If you're not familiar with the character that Spacey's playing here, it's a character named Francis Underwood, who also goes by Frank Underwood. It's from the House of Cards Netflix series. Frank Underwood's a terrible, terrible human being. He is a politician that's vying for the presidential office. He will literally kill anybody that gets in his way, will extort people, blackmail people, just a horrible human being. But very entertaining, as Spacey is, I think, by probably anybody's estimation, one of the best actors of at least my generation. So he puts this video out. What is he referring to? Well, that's what's weird about this video. This is the first time the public had heard anything from Spacey in quite some time, in months, after a bunch of sexual assault allegations came down from teenage boys. So a long period of time goes by, and then there's this video of him as Frank Underwood basically saying, "We're not done. You want me back, and I know it." So I have a question for you. If you had charges that could put you away for life, would you be playing around like that? Would you be putting videos out there? Is Spacey drunk on his own ego? Or does he know something we don't know? Does he know he's going to skate and be okay? Or is the video, like many people think, a threat to Hollywood? And what am I talking about there? I am talking about the Hollywood Illuminati, also known as the Hollywood Vampires. And there's a lot to this. When I first visited Los Angeles, I'll never forget it. The first trip I ever made, I was literally met at the airport, and I was taken straight to the Riot House, which is the Hyatt on Sunset. Incredible historic hotel. There's a million stories about this place. This is where Guns N' Roses drove motorcycles down the hallways. Led Zeppelin threw a TV out of like the 14th floor or something like that. Just a very legendary place. But I walked through the door, and the first person I literally run into, like bump chests with, is Little Richard. And he's loud as can be. "Hello, young man," just like you would think he would be. And we got to chit-chatting, and he was like, he could tell that I wasn't from here. And I got to talking about how I was from Iowa, and this was my first time there. And it turns out that Little Richard actually lived on the 11th floor of this hotel. The whole floor. The entire floor was just his. This was my first kind of, wow moment. Like, this is a different world out here. And not just from Iowa, but from everywhere. What's really interesting is about an hour after we checked into the hotel, there was a rooftop swimming pool, which I had never experienced before either. And it was incredible. And this was when I was in my band. A bunch of record labels brought us out here to showcase. And I met this other band on the rooftop that was out here as well to showcase, and I met their manager. And their manager was a young kid that had grown up in Long Beach. And we got to talking, about where we're from and how we made it out to LA and how we got in the game. And within 5 minutes, he says to me, "Have you spent, much time in the Hollywood Hills?" And I said, "No, this is like my first time ever in California. This is as far as I've got." And the Hollywood Hills are right behind the Hyatt House. And he says to me, "Yeah, you want to stay away from there, man." And I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, when you're out here, you're going to hear a lot about the Hollywood vampires." And I go, "The Hollywood vampires?" And then he goes, "Yeah." And he was like, "Just between you and I, it's real." And I'm like, "It's real? Like what, vampires are real? There's vampires sucking blood in the hills?" And he just says, "Well, I don't really want to get into it, but I'm just saying, there's bad elements in the hills. Just stay away from there and you'll be good." And didn't think much of it. I figured he was just trying to tell me that there's just some sketchy characters in the business that live in the hills type of thing. What's really bizarre is, now that I think about it, and this is literally popping in my head as I'm telling you this story, that night my brother and I decided to go for a hamburger. And there was a really famous hamburger shop called Mel's right around the corner. On our way to Mel's Burger, we walked right past Kevin Spacey. That's weird now that I'm thinking about that. So yeah, we walked right past Kevin Spacey to go in to get a burger. That night, what I remember, and not that I'm like, star crazy or anything, but this experience was so crazy to me of realizing that this is where all these people live. But that night, while we were in Mel's, not only did we pass Kevin Spacey, but Shaquille O'Neal came in and Britney Spears at the same time, which is really weird. And it was a really crazy moment for me. The trip itself was super short. We played like the following night and we were gone out the next day. And I didn't get back to LA for probably it was probably another year. But at that time, I was managing a band. And I'm not going to say the name of the band just because the story I'm going to tell gets pretty crazy, and they have parents, and I don't know what they do or don't want known, but I can tell the story if I don't say their names and talk about who they are. But they were a young band from Iowa that I was managing, and I was able to get 3 or 4 record labels interested in them. So they gave us the money to bring the band out to showcase. And there was 6 kids in this band, and they were aged 16 to 19, very young. The main label that brought us out was Capitol Records, and they knew that the kids were young. They knew. And there was a lot of heat on this band. There was, the record companies that were interested in this band were very interested in them. Warner Brothers had already given them some money to do a demo deal, which is basically they will agree to pay and bring them into the studio to record. A very, very famous producer named David Kahn was also into them. Another producer named Mike Klink, who did the Guns N' Roses album, wanted to record with them. So there was a lot of heat on this band. But that night, we go out to dinner with Capitol Records, and the A&R rep is just laying it on heavy. I mean, he takes them to this very, very expensive restaurant, and he literally spends $2,500 on dinner. It's lobsters. He's buying Cristal for himself, but then sharing it with all the kids that are, like I said, the youngest guy in the band was 16 years old. The oldest guy was 19 at the time. And, I was older. I was 23 at the time. I wasn't their parent. I was their manager. I wasn't trying to stop them from having a moment. They were young men, and they, chose to do what they wanted to do. They weren't driving anywhere. We had like a Sprinter van to take us wherever we wanted to go. But that night during dinner, as the band was drinking pretty heavily, they started joking with this A&R rep about what it would take to get them to sign with Capitol Records. And one of the singers of the band had jokingly said, "If you really want to close the deal, when we get back to the hotel, you can get us a hooker that looks like Little Kim to take care of us all. And if you remember, Little Kim was this beautiful, beautiful African American rapper. She was, was with Biggie Smalls, just gorgeous. And I thought it was totally a joke as we were all talking, because it's something pretty forward to say to an A&R rep, So we wrap up and we leave and we go back to the Sunset Strip, and we're staying at the same hotel, the Riot House. I liked this A&R rep. He was a cool guy, but again, he was laying on pretty thick. Like every other sentence says, you're going to sell 10 million records, you're going to tour the world, you're the greatest thing you've ever seen, that type of stuff. So we get back to the room, and he was like, all right, guys, I got the whole night, with you. What are we going to do? And let me also explain this. An A&R rep's job, back in the day when record companies made ridiculous money, their job is to just make the band like the label. It's to hang out with them and take care of them. That's it. It's artist and repertoire is the name of their title. And they have a company credit card to do this with, and that is their job. While the upper A&R reps, or the VPs of A&R, decide who they ultimately want to sign, the junior A&R reps are just supposed to be cool and make the bands like that label. So we get back to the room, and he's, the guys are buzzing from drinking their wine at dinner. And he's like, yo, guys, I got, pinked out on the way. He's got more alcohol coming up to the room. Again, I'm thinking, it's cool. They're in their room. They're not going anywhere. In Iowa, most kids start drinking beer when they're 14, 15 years old anyways on dirt road parties. So not a big deal. So we get back to the room. The guys get their alcohol. They're drinking. This A&R rep busts out the weed. Everybody starts smoking weed. And the next thing I know, knock, 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 knock. And I open the door, and there is a girl that could be separated at birth with Little Kim. I mean, just beautiful, but I mean, the resemblance to Little Kim was striking. I could not believe what I was looking at. And sure as shit, she is there to take care of the entire band. And I am like, you have got to be kidding me. And I turn and I just kind of look at the A&R rep, and I'm like, geez, Scott, what are you doing? And he's like, take care of your boys. Again, I'm not their dad. I'm not, trying to stop them from having a moment. But you could guess what occurred next. This happened, and it was such a weird experience. And again, what hit me the whole time this was going on is just how different this world is. Like, I was trying to say to myself, how would I feel if this was my job and I brought kids that are 16, 17, 18, 19 out to Los Angeles, got them drunk, got them high, and then bought them a hooker tailored to their liking to do whatever they want, all of them, and then that night I go home. Honestly, I personally would have felt really creepy. I would have felt really just it's in the moment when you're laughing and you're kind of buzzed and drunk yourself, and I'm looking at these kids that in their young minds are having the time of their life. I'm thinking, yes, this is a memory they'll have, but as someone that's a little bit older with some experience, it's like, yeah, this is really dark. Now, where am I going with all this? Where I'm going with is it was just an acknowledgement to me that this was a different world that I was in. It was a different world that this A&R rep lived in. This was just life out here. People lived in hotels. People dropped thousands of dollars on lobsters and champagne like it's nothing. They bought hookers like it's nothing. They got underage kids drunk and high like it's nothing. This was just, it was kind of like the shadow to the darkness. You know what I mean? It was like you can see the edge of what this town is. Um, so I went home, or not went home, but I went to my own room that night and woke up the next morning. And I went for a walk on Sunset Strip. And what's crazy about Sunset Strip is it's actually very, very small. You think of it being some, huge like part of LA. It's this tiny little, I don't know, 8 to 10 block area. And during the daytime, it's so dirty. It's just disgusting. It reminded me of Las Vegas during the daytime. I mean, at night, it looks all shiny and bright, but when the sun comes up and you see it for what it is, it's so freaking dirty. It's so freaking dirty. So, to make a long story short, that band ended up moving out here where they signed a development deal with Mike Klink, who is the producer for Appetite for Destruction. But we ended up going our own ways due to just personal differences in their lifestyle and where things were going. And it was a heartbreaker because I really cared about those kids. And shortly after, they broke up due to drug issues and things that you would never, ever in a million years would think would happen to them. But they stepped in a crack of darkness in this town and it swallowed them. And that's how it works out here. It's not the city of angels, it's the city of fallen angels, which I would soon learn as well when I moved out here. And I moved out here shortly after they did. I pretty much came out here and got them set up, and 2 weeks later moved out myself. And while I was out here, I befriended all kinds of people in the industry, the music industry and the film industry, and I kept hearing about this Illuminati stuff that, in the Hollywood Hills, man, you got to stay away from the Hollywood Hills. You got to stay away from the Hollywood Hills. It's the worst up there. Like, you can't believe what goes on up there. That's where the Illuminati is. That's where all the occult secrets are. That's where the Hollywood vampires are. And I did. I stayed away from the hills. It was not really my scene. I'm not a big drug guy, and I knew that about the Hollywood Hills. Enough people talked about how if you want drugs, go to the hills. And I befriended a gentleman named George. And if you guys followed my history, you know that my friend George passed away from cancer about 3 years ago. And it was a heartbreaker for me because George was the one guy that I met out here that wasn't involved with the entertainment industry at all. He was just a really good dude, lived his whole life in Venice Beach. Really, really cool guy. Unfortunately, George also battled with heroin addiction. And it was something he often tried to hide from me. And towards the end of his life, he was finally a little more open about it. And I'm glad he was because it allowed us to kind of reach a new level of friendship. But unfortunately, he got cancer and it ate him up pretty fast. He got lymphoma, and within like 6 months, he was gone. From the time he was diagnosed till he was gone, it was like 6 months. But I remember talking to him about the Hollywood Hills too, and the Hollywood vampires. And I said to George, I said, are the Hollywood vampires the same as the Illuminati? And he was like, yeah, same thing. He was like, the vampires is just a term because, if you let them, they'll suck your lifeblood, man. I mean, they'll kill you. And I used to say, how do you know that this is real, that this is going on? And it was mostly through stories to him. He was like, oh, I know this friend who knew this person that was in the entertainment industry. And the stories that he told me were crazy. They were telling me that to get to a certain level of success, there are these groups that throw these sex orgies, and regardless of whatever your persuasion is, whether you're into men or women, you just gotta do whatever you want. For a set time period, you have to give yourself up to do whatever the elite that run everything want you to do. Supposedly it was all very satanic. He told me some really dark stories about how there were this was a known thing, these HIV parties where people who had HIV would knowingly infect a person with it, and that person would know that they were going to be infected with HIV. I mean, just super dark, disturbing stuff. And before he passed away, we had one more conversation about it, and I forget how it came up, but he basically just said to me, "Just stay out of the Hollywood Hills." So I was beyond interested at this time as to what this was, and then you started seeing all this stuff online of all these crazy symbols of Jay-Z doing the hand diamond, the Illuminati sign, and all these different artists that have crazy Illuminati imagery in their music videos, and this is a real thing. I mean, this is everywhere. The Eye of Horus, all this stuff. I had to know. I wanted to know really, really bad. And there were a couple times in my life when I was around very famous people and I tried to bring up the conversation. And for some reason, everybody that I know that was super famous, I was never able to actually broach that conversation. There would always be some reason why either they wouldn't want to talk about it or they couldn't talk about it, or the conversation would quickly come to an end. And then about a year and a half ago, I started working with a new agent named Rich Super. And Rich had a long history of working with a lot of comedians. I mean, everybody from, in his very early days, from Richard Pryor to Dave Chappelle to, oddly enough, Artie Lang, who's been struggling with drugs really bad as of late. But essentially, it was late one night and we were hanging out and we were discussing the different people he had worked with. And it was everybody from Brian Callen to Chelsea Handler was another one. And I was talking to him about, the power structure and how, some, acts seem to just emerge and fire up the ladder like a cannonball. Just boom, they're just huge. Amy Schumer's one of them. I mean, she comes on the scene and a year later, she's selling out arenas and no one can really kind of pinpoint why. It's happened, a few times with different musical acts as well, where they just come out and they explode. And that's not how Hollywood works, guys. I can tell you that even if you have everything lined up, and even if everything looks to be perfect in your corner, it's just very rare that things just explode. I mean, it's so rare, it's like, it's not even 1 in a billion. It's like 1 in a trillion that things like that happen. It's just so hard to get anywhere because the industry is built to keep you out. Anybody that has a piece of their pie is not, willfully giving it up. So when things happen and, an artist just comes out of like a comet through the sky and explodes, it's really weird. And we were talking about that. And I said to him, Richard, I need to ask you like a real question. And I'm like, just please answer me, because I've met, many different people over the years, and I'm friends with some people that are famous, and I can't seem to breach this conversation with anyone. Every time I bring it up, it just seems like people don't want to talk about it. And he's like, yeah, what are you talking about? And I said, is this, whole Illuminati thing real? Where there's a small group of people that kind of control everything, and they decide who makes it. They're involved in politics, and they decide, who becomes president. And in order to rise to a certain level, you have to, essentially give up your soul and become a slave for a time period and do whatever somebody else wants you to do. And it involves all this Satanism and, all the sexual stuff. I'm like, I just want to know, is this real? He takes a drink of his drink and he looks at me and he was like, why do you want to know that? And I'm like, well, are you kidding me? I mean, I'm in the business. I want to know. Because I can tell you right now, if I ever get to a place where someone says, hey, if you want this job, you got to let me fuck you. That's not happening, or I got to, do something I don't want to do or hurt somebody or something. I just, It was weird because he took another drink, he took a really long pause, and he looked at me and he said, "You really want to know?" And I said, "Yes, I really want to know." He paused again, and then he says, "It's absolutely real." I'm like, "What?" I did not expect that answer. He was like, "It's real." Like, "What do you mean it's real?" And he goes, "You asked." And I go, "Come on, man." And he goes, "Look at Jay-Z." He goes, "Jay-Z is one of the most powerful people the entertainment industry has ever known. He's the head of Live Nation. He's the head of his own, major label. He came from like nothing." And I go, "Yeah, well, I know. There's a lot of success stories." And he goes, "No, like Chad." He's like, he came from the projects to absolutely running this industry. He goes, "You are one of the best at what you do." And he's being an agent when he's saying this stuff to me. I'm not sitting here bigging myself up. But he said, "You're one of the few people that have found a way to put together a team and carve your own lane, and build not only a career for yourself, but something that there's always opportunity for it to grow." And he goes, "But how hard is that growth? You tell me." And I'm like, "Oh, no, it's extremely hard. Yeah, you got to always stay on it 24/7, never stop. You have to put yourself in a position uh, to be, quote, lucky," which I hate that term. You got to always put yourself in a position to win. You just can, yeah, it's very, very hard because even if things are lined up, that doesn't mean you'll make it. He goes, "Right." And he goes, "But yet Jay-Z is running this industry." And he goes, "You don't think there were people that selected him for that?" And I'm like, "Well, who are these people?" And he was like, "Most of them you don't know and you won't. Some of them you do." And today that freaks me out because during the Me Too movement, there were a couple of big names that I had heard rumors of stuff before it ever happened. The Weinstein stuff, Harvey Weinstein, I can tell you that stuff, those rumors were flying around LA for a long, long, long time. I mean, I was hearing those rumors. The Bill Cosby stuff, those rumors were flying around the industry for a long time. And these are like titans of the industry, especially Weinstein. So for Weinstein to go down, there has to be a serious shakeup. And, I had mentioned that to him. I said, "Well, how about this Weinstein thing? I mean, if he was one of the big, one of the most powerful guys," and he goes, "He was a sacrificial lamb." We started talking about the fact that if you give, one big wig up like that, then everybody else is kind of protected because that story will dominate the press. It will dominate it. And that name was as big as it gets. Weinstein. I mean, that was as big as it gets. So he's going down for all that stuff. And then I'm like, "Yeah, but this can't be. I don't believe in any of this stuff. I can't wrap my mind around the fact that there's some, satanic cult that's running things that has all these sex slaves and it's all these very powerful people." And then what comes out in the press? Nexium, right? Did you guys hear about this? Nexium and the female actress from Smallville. And what is it? It's this powerful Illuminati-like sect of extremely wealthy people that are recruiting sex slaves that are getting branded with the initials of the guy that's leading the cult. And some of these, parties have been held at the most wealthy people in the world. These parties have been held at their establishments and their homes. And I'm like, what is going on? And the deeper and deeper and deeper I dug into it, there's a lot of legs to the story. There's a lot of reason to believe that this is real. That the hills and the Hollywood vampires and all this stuff, that it's all real. Now, I've never personally, I guess, experienced anything that I would say I can look at and say, that's Illuminati. But what I can tell you for a fact is that these people, a lot of these people, just live by a different set of rules. This is why Kevin Spacey could put a video out of a character that's basically telling the public, I'm not going to pay for what I did because you want me. You need me on that show. We're not done. I mean, what kind of mindset do you have to have where in the face of very real criminal charges that can put you away the rest of his life, do you put a video up like that as a character that got away with murder? There's a lot of belief that Kevin Spacey was a part of one of the most powerful circles of the Illuminati that ran Hollywood. I guess time will tell. Because he already had to appear in court, and I know his court case has just started. But it will be very interesting. Very interesting to see how this goes for Kevin Spacey. It's hard to believe that there's like some secret society that could have that much influence and play. It's so hard to believe that I don't want to. I don't want to believe it. And I hope it's not true. But if it were, it wouldn't be the first time that a secret society of powerful individuals were calling shots and pulling strings for a much larger operation. So what can we do in defense of it? If it's real, fight to be successful. Fight to make your dream happen. Fight to be somebody who makes it without having to sell their soul. And I'm okay with that fight because, like I said, I cannot be somebody's pincushion for success. Oh, man. Nothing would be more terrifying to get to a certain level and then, be pulled into a room and it's a bunch of people that are saying, hey, now that you made it this far, you got to sell your soul to move on. Because this soul is not for sale. Thank you guys for listening to episode 5 of the Intercrowded Room podcast. I'll be back on Monday with more. All the best.